Hey everybody, Andy Kvernen here with another Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. I've got a little riddle for you today as we begin our time, and it's this. How do you get the right answer and still get it wrong? How do you get the right answer and still get it wrong? I wonder, have you ever had somebody in your life that was fixated on getting the right answer? And perhaps it annoyed you a little bit. I remember growing up, I had a cousin, and we really had a good relationship, but we both loved similar things, and we both loved to kind of one-up each other in conversation. We loved to prove to each other how much we knew. We both collected Kirby Puckett baseball cards. We both liked music and other kinds of sports, the Minnesota Vikings. And so we were always trying to prove how much we knew by reciting stats or different facts or different things. And I think we sort of annoyed each other at different times. There's a church in the first century that Paul writes to called the Corinthian church, where the dynamic, the ethos, was to demonstrate how much they knew, how much leverage they could keep over each other in a variety of situations. In fact, in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, is his first one in the New Testament, there's this argument about who they're following. And some are following Paul, some are following Cephas, others are following Apollos, and of course all those men are following Jesus, but they're so caught up in some of these details and some of these petty arguments. They're trying to prove to each other how great they are and how much they know, and so they're arguing about these things. Later on in the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about their arguments over who gets to sit where at the table when they eat the Lord's Supper together. There's a systematic pattern of sort of one-upping each other for the Corinthian church, and Paul calls it out. And in fact, in the middle part of the book, Paul acknowledges their dispute about another topic, and this time it's about food that's been sacrificed to idols. See, in Corinth, it was a very pagan culture, and idolatry was a big deal. And so oftentimes, priests, pagan priests, would offer food to idols, and then they'd turn around and they'd allow it to be sold in the marketplace. And so you never really knew whether you were eating food that had been sacrificed to idols or not. And for some, their conscience allowed them to eat that food with a lot of freedom and to say, you know what, idols are idols, it's no big deal, let's just eat and not worry about it. But for others, they were very concerned. And so there was this argument that sort of grew up in the Corinthian church about whether or not they should do this. And Paul addresses the argument, and it's actually a big deal to Paul because, of course, idolatry is a big deal to God. God desires that we do not worship anyone other than Him. And so Paul addresses this, but before he gets into the specifics, he brings us in the first part of chapter 8 to an important discussion. And in this discussion, I think our riddle is going to be answered. How do you get it right and yet still get it wrong? And so listen to what Paul says to the Corinthians about food sacrificed to idols in 1 Corinthians 8. He says, "Now concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge." Now, he's referencing again sort of a motto from the Corinthians. We all possess knowledge. This is something they would have recited to each other with some pride, kind of like we would recite different, American mantra, patriotic mantra in different ways. And so all of us possess knowledge. And he says, this knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. You notice this contrast there? Knowledge puffs up. Knowledge inflates our sense of ego. And knowledge makes us look good at somebody else's expense. But there's an antithesis there. He says, but love builds up. Love doesn't puff up. Love builds up. He's contrasting knowledge with love. And then he says, if anyone imagines that he knows something, again, this idea of knowledge, if anyone thinks he's smart, listen to this. He says, he does not yet know as he ought to know. See, knowledge isn't just about how smart you are. There's something more to it, at least in God's economy. And so he says, but if anyone loves God, he's known by God. If anyone loves God, if anyone participates in God's character as a God of love, if anyone loves God, he's known by God. How do you get the answer right and yet still get it wrong? You focus on facts, you focus on semantics, you focus on details, and you neglect the greater teaching of God, which is to love. Now, it doesn't matter that those facts, those details, or it doesn't mean that those facts and those details don't matter. In fact, Paul goes on to teach quite a lot about food sacrificed to idols. But he starts with the thing that's of greater importance. He starts with love. And of course, in 1 Corinthians 13, this beautiful love chapter, he elevates in glorious fashion God's desire that we love first as a matter of the highest ethic, okay? How do you get the answer wrong even though you've got it right? You focus on facts without love. Friends, let's be a people that love as God loves us today. And let's get both the answer right and let's get the ethos right. Let's love our neighbor as ourselves. God bless you, friends.